Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Khalil and today I'm going to teach you guys how to shoot manual photos and video. And I have my son with me, Josiah. He's going to be my subject so I can show you guys an example of how I take photos in different scenarios. Right now we're walking over to the basketball court. Yeah, I'll just get right into the video so you guys when we get there. Go ahead. All right. So first step is we are not going to shoot like this where we're overexposed in the background and my face is dark. We are going to shoot like this. We're going to use this nice natural light. Here, son, can you hold my notebook for me? Please don't drop it. Just the notebook. All right, let's get this tripod set up. Can you see my notebook, please? I have my little list of topics I want to go over. So right now, we are filming on my Canon EOS M50. That's what you guys are looking at me from. It is my mirrorless camera. It is EFM mount, so I'm using my vlogging lens, which is a Canon EFM 11 to 22 millimeters. So it's pretty wide and it closes in a little bit. There's some kids, they probably want to play basketball, so I gotta hurry up.
You can ask them, they can play like over there, like right there.
Oh, they're fine. Sorry about that, guys. There was a kid bouncing a basketball and I kindly asked him, hey, I'm filming a YouTube video. If you don't mind, could you not bounce that? I'd appreciate it. And I told him that they could get shouted out in my YouTube video as well if they stick around. So, yeah. Like I was trying to say, I am shooting on my Lumix GH4 for the photo examples. And then, as you can see, I'm going to show you guys everything on my EOS M50. That took way too long to explain, so let's get right into it. So like I said, my name's Khalil Jackson. This is my YouTube channel where I teach people about cameras.
I can say my name's Josiah too.
Yeah, this is my son.
Josiah.
Thank you, Josiah. So I was saying,
my name's Josiah and that's Khalil.
Thank you, Josiah. So like I was saying, my name's Khalil. This is my channel where I teach people about cameras, photos, videos, other technology. So my goal is to teach you guys how to shoot manual exposure for photo and videos. Well, while we're waiting for that train, I will say, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe and look out for more content. So one thing I want to let you guys know, there's a time and place for manual exposure. If you're at a sports event and you're not that well versed with how to use a camera in manual mode, I would suggest that you use aperture priority or shutter priority modes, which lets you just set one parameter. So if you have it in aperture priority mode, you set the aperture and it'll adjust the shutter speed based off what the camera guesses you'll need. If you use shutter priority, then you set the shutter speed and it'll lock that right there and it'll change the aperture depending on the lighting. The whole point of this video is how to teach you guys how to use manual exposure to get perfectly exposed images or be able to make a creative adjustment, whether it be overexposed or underexposed, depending on what your creative look is. The benefits of manual mode and manual exposure is you have full control of the photo. If you shoot in RAW, you can always change those settings later in post-production, but right now we're talking about how to get the right settings in camera. There's three components to the exposure triangle. The first one's gonna be your shutter speed, second one's gonna be your aperture, and the third is gonna be your ISO. They don't have to be in any particular order, but those three parameters all work together so you can adjust and get the exact exposure that you want. Now let's get into a breakdown of what each of those things do. So we're gonna start with the aperture. The aperture is the iris of the camera, and you can look at it like your eyeball. When you're in a dark room, your iris will open up bigger so you can let in more light. When you go out in a bright environment, your iris will shrink so you can let in less light so you can see better. Same thing works for a camera. Also, the aperture works for blurry backgrounds. If you want to take a portrait, you're going to want to have a low aperture, which will focus on the subject. If you're taking a landscape photo, you're going to want to have a high aperture, so everything is in focus from right in front of you all the way to the mountains way over there. And all these things I'm explaining when I edit, I'm going to be showing you examples that'll be overlaid on the screen. Sometimes with a low aperture, certain lenses give a certain characteristic of bokeh. Bokeh is a term for when you focus on something and the background is blurry. It's these tiny little circles. So some examples of reasons for different aperture, like I said before, if you're doing landscape, you're gonna wanna have high aperture if that's what you want, everything in focus. If you're doing portraits, you're gonna wanna have a low aperture. But at the same time, for photo and for video, if you are inside and it's very dark in that room and you don't have any external light to light your subject, you can always lower your aperture and it'll let in more light. But whenever you adjust one of these parameters, you're gonna have to always adjust the other two to get the exposure that you're looking for. One thing I want to say before I move on to the next one, which will be shutter speed, is that balance is key. All right, now let's get into the shutter speed. Shutter speed is how long the shutter is open when you're taking a photo. It also has to do with blurriness when you're doing video, but we'll get into that in a second. So say you want to take a photo of a car driving by very fast, or someone running, or a horse running, or whatever it may be, a moving object. You're gonna want to have a high shutter speed so that your shutter is opening and closing very fast, and you can capture that moment without any blur. If you want to have a long exposure and more light let in, say you want to take a picture of the stars, what you're going to want to do is put your camera on a tripod and put it on timer mode, so that way when you click the shutter button, your camera doesn't shake. But my point is when you want to take a picture of the stars, you want to go with a low shutter speed so that the shutter stays open for longer, lets in more light, therefore making your exposure brighter. Real quick, when you shoot on video, whatever your frame rate is, there's a rule of, I think it's rule of thirds, I may be wrong, I should know this, I'll overlay it if I'm wrong, but there's a rule that if you're shooting in 24 frames per second, you're gonna wanna have a shutter speed of 50. Not a lot of cameras shoot in a 24.3 or whatever it is. So long story short, if you wanna have camera blur be reduced for video, whatever your frame rate is, you wanna double your shutter speed for that. So if you're shooting in 24 frames per second, your shutter speed is gonna be 50. And if you're shooting in 60 frames per second, your shutter speed is gonna be 120. We'll get into that in another video. All right, so the last thing on this list of the exposure triangle is your ISO. With your cameras, I have a button right here and it says ISO. When you click that button, you have a dial. ISO is artificial light. So the amount of ISO that you add to your image is gonna be your artificial light. So you can use that to compromise when your other two parameters aren't really lining up. But you don't want to introduce too much ISO. If you do, it's gonna have some grainy looking dots on your photo or video, which is called noise. And you can reduce that in post-production with noise reduction, but it's a pain in the butt, and it's best just to get the best exposure you can with using the least amount of ISO as possible. All right, you guys, so those are all the things that I wanted to go over. Now we're gonna get into a couple examples. I'm gonna utilize my son as a subject. I'm gonna take some photos on here and I'm gonna explain to you guys what we're doing. So here's a GH4 and we're shooting with the 25mm Lumix lens, which has an aperture of 1.7. If I turn the camera on, you can actually see the iris in there, which is the aperture. So let's go ahead. Hopefully that wind isn't picking up too bad. See it getting smaller? Now we'll open it up. And so what that's doing is opening the iris, and the aperture is going to let in more light. Now an example of shutter speed, since it's bright outside, I'm gonna need like if I'm at 4.0 aperture, I'm gonna need a shutter speed of 640. All your cameras will have a light meter at the bottom, and if it's in the middle, it's perfectly exposed. If it's to the left, it's underexposed, and if it's to the right, it's overexposed. It doesn't mean good or bad, it just means how far off it is from perfect exposure. And that's your creative choice if you want to do brighter or darker. But if you want perfectly exposed photos on manual, just put it in the middle. And that's exposing for the background. It's going to be different if you point out your subject. All right, so let's get a couple pictures of Josiah. All right, come over here, son. Let's have you stand right here.
Right there. There's a rainbow.
Now do the peace sign.
It's a peace sign.
All right, guys, so watch your step. So for this photo, since I'm shooting at a 1.7 aperture, which is letting in a lot of light, I had to put my shutter speed all the way up to 2000. And I just kept my ISO at 200, which is the lowest amount I could do because I'm outside. I don't need any artificial light. I'm using the natural sunlight. I'm actually just gonna use these same settings. I'm gonna take a couple pictures of him, and then I'll probably take a landscape photo with my aperture at the highest number I can. And yeah, I mean, hopefully I explained it enough. When I show you the examples, it should make more sense.
There's a rainbow, you see. You see the rainbow? Yeah, it's right there. You see like that?
All right, so this next photo, I'm gonna show it on screen right now. I took a picture of the playground that's kind of far away. So I have an aperture of f11 and I have a shutter speed of 50 and my ISO is still at 200, but the exposure is still perfect right in the middle. All right, another thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you an example of a low aperture with the subject that's close to the camera. I'll show you guys how to blur the background. Then right here, put your hand out like this. All the way as far as you can. Like that, okay? Put your hand up. No, towards me, put your hand towards me. Just like that. All right, now I'm gonna take a picture of the sun. Since it's super bright shining into the lens, I'm gonna have to, let's see what we have to do.
Did you?
All right, so to take a picture into the direct sunlight, I used the aperture of 7.1. I used a shutter speed of 2000, and I just left the ISO at 200, like I said, because we're outside. Let's get a picture of...
We're gonna take a picture of the clouds.
Here, go on the other side of the fence. Yeah, go on the other side and look at me. Hold on to the fence. Yeah, like that. Look over that way. Perfect. Stay right there till I tell you you're done. Ready? Now look to the side look at the park. Our last thing we're gonna do is try and take a macro photo of one of these plants.